there are a few different things I want to point you toward. But first, I'll just tell you what's going to happen. So I'm going to talk for probably, I don't know, 20, 25 minutes, something like that. Try to keep it short. I always say that, but I'm going to try this time again. And then I'll open it up to questions. You can ask me whatever you want. It doesn't have to be advanced measurements related necessarily, but it probably should be considering the topic. But don't hold back. Just ask me whatever. And like I said, I'll be recording this and I'll be placing the recording, or Brandon will be in our office, into on the media page on Go iGUIDE where all the webinars are. Okay, so today's webinar is all about advanced measurements. And advanced measurements needs a bit of a description. But the goal of this webinar, first off, is to explain what it is, explain where to find it, how to use it, and why you might want to use it. So there's lots of reasons why you might want this. And I would hope that towards the end of the webinar, if you don't mind, if you'd share or ask perhaps if a particular reason would be suitable. So I come from a sort of a real estate background, so I can think of lots of uses in terms of space planning and understanding a space. Reasons why you would want to measure a space without being there, right? Because that's what advanced measurements is. It's the ability to measure in three-dimensional space from the iGUIDE, remotely. And so I can think of lots of uses for this, especially since my wife and I just bought a house and we moved into our new house, and our new house raised a lot of questions about window sizes and room dimensions and kitchen backsplash areas and all sorts of wacky stuff. So advanced measurements has a lot of uses in that sense, but I'm sure there's others. So if you think of any, feel free to share them in the chat and I'll verbally sort of bring it up. So let's go through the stuff that's available to you first. So the first thing I want to point you toward is this page that you see directly in front of you. This is the page that you will find on the Go iGUIDE site, and you can have a peruse through here. It's found by hovering your mouse cursor over iGUIDE at the top, and then if you look all the way down toward the bottom, you'll see Advanced Measurements appears there. So when you click on it, you're going to be given access to this video and a bunch of other information. So, have a read. There's also a demo iGUIDE with advanced measurements enabled. Obviously, it's not a finished space, so that we'll talk about later, but this can be very useful for certain things in the construction phase or when there's no walls. But this page has, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, a link to the knowledge base article, wherever it is. There you go, here, all about the measurement tool. So advanced measurements is really the measurement tool, which I'll show you in a minute, but with two more advanced versions of it. So the measurement tool, if you don't know, is a way for you to measure on a floor plan in 2 dimensions, and it's available for every single iGUIDE. And if you didn't know about the measurement tool, shame on you, because it's one of the best features of the iGUIDE. So the measurement tool is just that ruler in the bottom right-hand corner of the floor plan area. The measurement tool is something that is extremely easy to use and definitely sets the iGUIDE apart from other tours. I'm not aware of anyone else that has something that's quite this easy to use. So that's fantastic for iGUIDE service providers. Second, let me show you where to find advanced measurements should you wish to order them before I give you a demo. So let's suppose that you think to yourself after this webinar, oh golly, I should hook up one of my iGUIDEs to advanced measurements and give it a whirl. You can do that when you create an iGUIDE by doing one of two things. Whoops, there we go. When you click Create iGUIDE, you're going to have the option to choose Standard versus Premium. If you choose a Premium iGUIDE, it includes advanced measurements. So if you've already done a Premium iGUIDE, you have advanced measurements anyway, and you can go play with it on your own iGUIDE. How cool is that? But in the event that you choose a Standard, you can then select advanced measurements as well for a fee. All of our fees are available on the Go iGUIDE site under processing pricing. So I don't know if you guys can see that on your screen, but hover over photographer and go down to processing pricing, or go to support. And then you're going to see processing fees are also listed here. And it's different for every area. That's why there's different sections. There's international and Canadian. So there's two different currencies there. So when you add advanced measurements onto an iGUIDE, what will happen is that nothing will change. You won't see any difference. However, if you want to see what's different, you have to click on the ruler. You have to click on the measurement tool. And when you do that, you're going to see, well, the help screen comes up. Here, never show again. We'll never see it again now. But now it says there's a number 1 here. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to give you a demo of all the modes included in advanced measurement. And the KBA, the knowledge base article, or the article on the support desk, has a detailed explanation with super cool graphics for every mode. So there's mode 1. Oops, there we go. There's mode 2. And then there's mode 3. So I'm going to show every single one of those modes to you right now, tell you the differences and the advantages and disadvantages of each one. Starting with mode 1. So let's go back to our sample iGUIDE. So this is just a regular iGUIDE, nothing fancy about it. I just loaded it out of our gallery. I like this property because it has this really cool hexagonal rug thing going on, but there's nothing special about it. It's just an iGUIDE that has, it's a premium iGUIDE, so it has advanced measurement. So right now I'm in measure mode 1. So in measure mode 1, what I want you to do is I want you to look at the floor plan on the left. I can click and drag from one point to another, anywhere on that floor plan, and I can get a distance. So that distance is from the first point I clicked to the last point where I let go. So you have to click and hold. I don't know if that was clear. And you can use this for all sorts of really quick, fun measurements. So if you want to measure, for example, a window, I hope you guys can see that. There you go. I measured a window really fast, just a quick measurement. Or if I want to measure the width of a hallway, maybe I've got a couch, I want to move it in, and the couch is like, you know, really wide with the legs on, and I'm kind of trying to decide, do I need to take the legs off to move the couch through? Okay, well, I can measure that again on the floor plan. You can measure quickly the length or width of a room, and that's extremely useful. So when you are looking at the floor plans, what you're going to see is that the room dimensions are from the longest length to the widest width. So what that means is they don't really reflect the actual room dimensions in some cases. Not every case, but in some. So here's a perfect example. I've got a bedroom down here that claims that it is 13 feet by 12-ish, or 13 feet. So I hope you guys can see these little arrows down here, but that's from the widest width here. But that's not really the width of the room, right? The width of the room is actually down here. So if I want to see if my couch fits, I can't just use that width. I have to sort of think, okay, well, you know, there's a few feet cut off for this doorway. So what is this width? So I can easily measure that with the measurement tool. So here you can see it was approximately this distance here. So it's actually, instead of being 12 foot 11 inches, it's actually 11 foot and 10 inches. So it cuts a foot or so off, give or take. And that's extremely useful for figuring out where things go in a space when the actual room divisions that are shown on the floor plan aren't ideal. They're not exactly what you'd want. It's very, very handy. Now, some of you, no one's asked this yet, but someone is going to ask at some point. I already know it. Can I zoom in on the floor plan to make these measurements easier? And the answer is no, you can't. It doesn't exist. Not yet anyway. Maybe one day, if you think that would be a good thing to have as a feature, to be able to zoom in and out on the floor plan, please make that suggestion in the feature suggestion section of the forum. So I'll just get it out of the way. If you have a suggestion for any feature with regards to the iGUIDE, so included in the interface or for the camera, the best place to put that suggestion is on the iGUIDE forum in the feature suggestions category. Because if you put it there, we see it, because we at Planetar read it. And also, you're going to see that other people will see it and they may, like upvote it or agree with you, basically, which is quite cool. So measure mode 1 is all about drawing on the floor plan. Now, one of the things you're going to notice is that there's this red, vertical line on screen, and it's kind of always there. So that's another tool that you can use if you want to help you measure. You don't really need it if you have measure modes 2 and 3, but it's nice that it's there anyway. So what I want you to do is I want you to see that that vertical line is corresponding with the edge of the window which is also where my cursor is placed. So to aid me in measuring things on the perimeter of the property, I can basically use that red line, and I can use it to line up my mouse cursor so that when I'm measuring, I can get a closer approximation of something that's on the perimeter of the property. So measuring by the visuals is possible in Measure Mode 1, but primarily it's for just measuring things on the floor plan. Now, weird side effect of Measure Mode 1 is that, here, I'll just erase all these measurements by clicking undo. So that circular arrow is the undo button. So if you create a measurement, you can click undo and it will go away, just so you know. But one weird side effect of this measurement is that the lines are persistent. So if I draw a line, so I'm drawing one in the master bedroom right now, hope you can see that. I can then draw another line, and then I can draw another line, and then I can draw another line, and I can create simple shapes. I can create a box or a triangle. It doesn't do circles. But doing that allows me to really quickly kind of draw out an outline of, say, something like a couch or a bed, and kind of get a feel for how much space I have on either side, and whether or not I'll be able to walk around it, or, you know, whatever. So you can kind of draw in the outlines of furniture, sort of. It's really quick. I use it all the time for that. I don't know if anyone else does, but it's kind of a weird side effect. It's something that you can do, which is quite cool. You can also draw in area rugs to see if they, you know, sort of are big enough for your space. Because often they'll come in sizes, right? And you'll know the size ahead of time. And IKEA is great for this. They'll give you a really weird size. It'll be like 5.5 by 8 by 6 or something. And you're thinking to yourself, is that big? I don't know. So you can just draw it in. You just draw in the, you know, the rectangle, and then you can kind of get a sense for if, you know, that will actually fit in your space. Okay, so Measure Mode 1 is pretty simple. Drawing lines on a floor plan. Measure Mode 2, a little more complicated. So let's get rid of the line. So switching to Measure Mode 2 means, and I'll go back and do it again, means I click on the number 1. So again, I've clicked the measurement ruler icon. I'll do it again right from scratch. And then I've got this little pop-up, and then I can click on the 1, and I have the option of choosing modes 1, 2, or 3. So I'm going to choose mode 2. I'm going to show that to you. So mode 2 is requires you to define a plane. So that's just a fancy way of saying I need to identify a wall by drawing it on the floor plan. So have a look at the floor plan at the very top. I'm going to draw a line that identifies that wall. Now I went too fast, so let me just skip a step here, or go back rather. So let's go back. Now if you look at the top, it tells you what to do. Click and drag on the floor plan to draw a line along any suitable wall. So that's what I'm doing. So I'm going to choose the wall that I want to measure on. That's the whole thing with Measure Mode 2, is that you pick a wall where there's something on that wall you want to measure. So that's almost always something like a window or a door or some other type of feature. But it can also be a ceiling height or the width of a fireplace or anything that's on a wall. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to define a wall. There we go. So I've drawn a line to define that wall. And then from the image, so this isn't on the floor plan anymore, I've switched to the image, I can now measure things. So I can also switch panoramas. So I'm just going to really quickly switch to this panorama, and then I'm going to zoom in. So if you don't know this already, you can zoom in using the scroll wheel on your mouse to get a little bit more accuracy. So I'm going to measure the size of the window trim. So what I've done is I've double-clicked on a point, and then I'm going to double-click on another point. And there you go. I've got a measurement. So the height of this window trim is 6 foot 8 inches. And so just before anyone asks, because I know you will, do you have to define the wall before you take the measurement? And the answer is yes, otherwise it doesn't work. So you have to do that. There's no easy way to just measure 2 points in space by just clicking on those points. It doesn't work that way. You have to define the wall first, or use Measure Mode 3, which I'll show you in a second. But again, the measurements are persistent, so you can just keep measuring stuff if you want. So I'm going to measure the width of this one for fun. There we go. So it's 3 feet wide from the edge of the trim. Or perhaps I want to measure, I don't know, the actual width of the glass, maybe. There we go, 1 foot 9 inches. So you can measure all sorts of stuff. This is very handy for things like determining, how wide a fireplace is, for example, how much space you have from above something like a fireplace to see if your TV fits, or measuring maybe for a painting, or measuring something like doorways. I would say that probably the most common use for this, though, is for ceiling heights. So if I, for example, hit a point on the floor and hit a point on the ceiling and try to line it up with something vertical, I'm going to get, it's hard to see, but 9 foot 3 inches apparently for these ceilings. It's a bit tricky because there's crown molding, but there's probably somewhere in this property that doesn't have crown molding where they cheaped out, where I could probably find a more accurate representation. When you are measuring, I don't know if I made this clear, you're going to basically define a plane. I'll just repeat it actually. You're going to define a plane, and then you're going to double click on 2 points to get the measurement in between those 2 points. So I'll show you one more time and then we'll move on. So I'm going to erase the plane that I've already, or the wall that I've already selected, by just selecting another mode and then going back to mode 2. So instead I'll do this wall instead. Oops, I messed that up. Hold on. There we go. Do this wall. There we go. Okay, so, and the way I know what wall I'm doing and what one I'm looking at is by looking at the Panos center. So you can see the Pano dot that I've selected is this one. That's the one I'm looking at. And the cone that emerges from it shows the perspective or field of view that I'm seeing right now. So that's pointed at this wall. So that's how I know kind of like what I'm measuring. So I'm going to measure from the floor all the way to the ceiling. And there you go, 8 foot 6 inches here for some reason. Additionally, at the top, you're going to see the estimated measurement uncertainty. So the distance from the panorama center, or the scan point, to the wall, and then the angle at which it's at, have an effect on the measurement uncertainty. But it's reported to you, and you'll see it change from measurement to measurement. So it's kind of interesting. Okay, so measure mode 2, again, just to reiterate, requires that you define a wall and that you measure on that wall. So measure mode 3 doesn't require that. So I'm going to switch to measure mode 3 by clicking on the number 2 and then clicking on the number 3. So in measure mode 3, what you do is you select 2 points, and then you switch to another panorama and you select 2 more points. So I'll show you what that looks like. Let's find something different. Is there anything fun in here we can measure? Yeah, let's try the ceiling height here. This should be cool. Oh no, we can't actually. Let's do, all right, we'll stick with the living room. We'll just keep doing it in here. Okay, so let's measure the size of this surround for the fireplace. That should be fun. Okay, so I'm going to pick 2 points on the image. So there's my first point. Oh, I got a big number 1. And there's my second point. And then I'm going to switch Panos to a different one. And so, oh, I can't use that one. Shoot. Here we go. And this one. Then I'm going to select the same 2 points. And what I should get, hopefully, fingers crossed. Oh, there we go. Perfectly. Exactly 4 feet. So until you select the second 2 points in the second panorama, you won't get a measurement. It'll have question marks. So let's do it again with the TV. Let's figure out how big this TV is. The measure of your worth as a North American is by how big your TV is. So, oh, we should probably do a diagonal measurement then. All right, fair. Okay, so there you go. Diagonal measurement. Okay, so it says question marks right now. So I'm going to go to another panorama. I'm going to do the same thing. Measure from the corner. The other corner. All right, 4 foot 3 inches. That's not bad. That's a pretty big TV. The benefit of using measure mode 3 is that you can kind of measure whatever you want. It doesn't have to be on a plane. So if I want to measure, for example, let's see. Yeah, here, we'll do a tile. Perfect. Okay, so let's measure the length and or width of this tile. Hopefully I can pick the right tile. Oh, I don't know. Which one did I pick? Hold on. All right, right at the corner. Okay, easy. All right, apparently they're 2 foot tiles. I was a little off there. That's why it says 111. So you can do measurements on the floor. You can do them on the walls. You can do them just floating in space. Measure mode 3 is very flexible. It doesn't require that you define a wall and measure on a wall. You can kind of measure whatever you want. So it's the same as measure mode 2. You can undo your measurements by clicking undo, or you can switch modes to go back and forth. So my suggestion for all of you today is right after this webinar, go and play with one of the demos on our site and just get to know how this works by messing around with it for like 10 minutes. It's totally worth it, because even if you don't need this every day, it'll come in handy eventually. And it's cool that it's there, especially if you already sell a lot of premium iGuides, because it's built in anyway. So, if you learn how to market and sell it, you're just adding value. Like, it's already there. Okay, so let's talk about, very briefly, some shooting tips. How are we doing for time? We all right? Oh yeah, we're cruising. Okay. So shooting tips. So earlier I mentioned that I couldn't do a measurement in the master bedroom using measure mode 3. I didn't say it. I alluded to it. Anyway, there's a very good reason for that. There's only one pano in the master bedroom. So measure mode 3 didn't exist when I shot this iGuide. Otherwise, I would have shot more. Actually, there might even be more panos. They're just disabled. It's hard to say. But you need 2 panos to be able to measure things with measure mode 3. So my first shooting tip, I've probably mentioned this in every webinar for the last 6 months, is shoot more panos, especially if you want advanced measurement. So if you have a client that really excited about this for some reason, maybe it's commercial property or a stud walk, like where there's no walls, and they want to document the space specifically for measurement, you need at least 2 panos per space, but you're probably going to need more than that. That's helpful for measure mode 3 because you specifically need 2 panoramas. There's actually a very detailed and fancy write-up at the bottom of the knowledge base article out down here about measurement uncertainty, and then there's all these really cool diagrams about like where to place your panos to get the best results. So I'm not going to go into that right now. That's for you to read later, but more panoramas is better. And proximity matters as well. So you probably noticed that when I was zooming in, like the closer I get, the blurrier it gets, so the less precise it is. So if I had a pano just closer to the windows, it would be much easier to measure the windows. So often you'll know ahead of time what it is that someone wants to measure. It's almost always features that are sort of fairly obvious, like windows and doors and concrete pads for equipment and that kind of stuff. So you need lots of panoramas to give you multiple perspectives, but you also need panoramas that are close to the thing that you're trying to measure. That usually also means more panos. So I'm sorry in advance for all the extra work I'm making for you, because you need panoramas for measurement in terms of the draftspeople drawing the floor plans. They need panoramas. You need panoramas or extra scans, I should say, for navigation so that people can smoothly navigate through the space. You need extra scans to show features to prospective buyers who are in a real estate transaction looking at a property and may want to know about the dishwasher or the stove or whatever. And now you need even more panoramas or more scans to take advantage of advanced measurement and be able to measure things on the images. So it's a little bit of extra work sometimes. But often it just means a few extra panoramas near things that are fairly obvious, like runs of pipes, windows and doors, I mentioned that already, electrical boxes, that kind of stuff. Okay, so let's talk about some uses, and then I'll just open it up to questions. So again, my background is in residential real estate, so I'm going to hit you with some of those. But there's a few different things in sort of the facility management kind of space that I can touch on. But I'll give you a few examples that work in a normal house. Sizing and positioning of furniture. So just figuring out where furniture goes is a big deal. It's a big part of moving into a house. So prospective buyers are the ones doing that, and they're the ones typically looking at the iGuide and using that information. So if they can get an understanding of whether or not their stuff fits, that can be pretty cool. And that's often things like, this happens a lot in Southern Ontario, where you'll have a bedroom and people want to know if a king size bed fits. People are obsessed with king size beds. I don't know why. So that kind of involves like a lot. Like, yes, the bed you can tell it will fit because it's smaller than the room dimensions, but then how much space is there on either side? Like, can you fit an end table? If the bed's centered, will it cover up an outlet? Like all that kind of stuff. So advanced measurements is very useful for that kind of stuff. It's quite nice. You can also use advanced measurements. Here, let's go to the kitchen, have a look. For planning out kitchen, placements. So that could be islands or counters or appliance placing, kind of figuring out where stuff goes in a kitchen. People do that, before they move in. They might do it after they move in. They might do it 5 years from when they move in. But replanning kitchens is it's a big deal. So that's a thing that this can be quite handy for. And it's much more precise than just measuring on the floor plans for the most part, because you can really tie your measurements down to things like wall intersections and specific details like where the trim starts and stops. You don't see that on the floor plan. You see a doorway, yes, but you don't see like where the trim starts and where it stops and where the baseboards intersect with the door trim and that kind of thing. But you can measure that on advanced measurements, which is quite cool. You can estimate repair costs. So this one's a little more construction-y, but you could, in theory, calculate the distance of a pipe or a run of wire, and you could figure out how much it would cost to swap that out. And that's a drain, supply, it doesn't really matter. You could measure ducting to see if how long it is to calculate a cost for replacement there. But my favorite one is flooring costs. So I used to sell flooring, so flooring is a big deal for me. So I really like the ability to measure, especially with Measure Mode 3 or with Measure Mode 3 on the floor, and kind of calculate really precisely what it is that I'm going to need in terms of putting flooring down. Because it's not as simple as just measuring a rectangle and estimating. It's much more complicated than that, especially with carpet. Carpet is a really sticky one because carpets come in rolls, right? They'll be 12 foot or in some cases a bit wider than that. So you have to do this process where it's called piecing, I believe, where they run seams, but you have to plan out the amount of carpet based on where it's best used in terms of where you put that, that 12 or whatever foot width, so that you have the fewest seams and they're in the most appropriate location. So Measure Mode 3 is very cool for that. I'm not an expert. I'm not going to go into detail on that, but it's pretty cool. Windows are also good. You really should, for windows, I used to sell blinds as well, so I have a lot of experience with this. You really should physically measure your blinds before you actually go get them made, because if they're off by even 1/8 of an inch, it can really be super irritating. But using Measure Mode 2 or 3, you can get a very, very accurate estimate for costs on window coverings. I wouldn't buy them based on those measurements. I mean, you probably could if you really were really brave about it, or depending on the types of blinds. So if they're ones that can be cut on site, then you could go have them trimmed if they were slightly off. So technically, yes, you could probably do it, but I wouldn't order like California shutters necessarily based on these measurements, but you can definitely get an extremely accurate cost estimate, because the cost doesn't change to any great degree when you change the width by 1/8 of an inch. It's not huge anyway. And window coverings, I mean, that's big money. People spend just gobs of cash on the California shutters. It's nuts. And then the big one, the real big one. Oh no, sorry, there's one more. So also paint. So again, measuring walls gives you an approximation of the square footage required to get the proper coverage when you're painting, like how much paint you need to buy, literally. But that's not really accurate, right? Like, you've got these big openings with trim that don't need paint. You've got fireplaces. There's a lot of features involved that you paint around. So it can really help you calculate, or help a contractor rather, calculate the cost of the materials for paint by looking at, say, Measure Mode 2 or Measure Mode 3. Measure Mode 2 is not going to help with things like ceilings, but it is certainly very easy to use for things like walls. But then the last one, this one everyone always asks for, is ceiling heights. So ceiling heights, we used to have ceiling height included in the iGUIDE report, I believe. I forget where it was, but they had to be removed because ceilings are very, very complicated. In a perfect world, all ceilings would just look like this. A big flat plane with a bunch of pot lights, nothing fancy. But that's not the real world. The real world has slope ceilings and curved ceilings and those ones that look like a weird, dome thing. And, so just having ceiling heights be reported is much more complicated than it seems. So Measure Mode 2 or 3 rather, allow you to just measure the ceiling height in any given location and then report it however it's required of you to report it. So let's suppose that you have a whole house that's all 8-foot ceilings, and then one room on the second floor that has sloped ceilings. So how do you report that? You can't just say, oh, the whole house has 8-foot ceilings. That's not accurate. You have to be more specific. And with measure modes 2 and 3, you can totally do that. Often, people are looking for a simple answer with regards to ceilings, and sometimes that just doesn't exist. But we get asked for that a lot. People ask for that all the time. Oh, do you provide ceiling heights? And the answer is, well, the data is there, and you can get it if you want. Another thing that we don't really touch on, sorry, I should have enabled this before, is that we don't really provide measurements for spaces like garages and balconies, but that doesn't mean the information isn't there. So if you really want to go onto a balcony or a garage and measure in that space, you can do that. We don't guarantee those measurements, but they're almost always very, very good, and certainly good enough to base estimates on. Okay, how much time do we have left here? Oh, good, perfect. We're right at 30 minutes. Fantastic. What I'm going to do is open it up to questions now. So type them in the chat. I see one already. It already mentions Matterport. That's fine. Okay. Does Matterport offer advanced measurement? First question. The answer is yes, and I'm very familiar with it. So their advanced measurements are done in their interface. It's very similar. I'm not saying they copied us. They have a ruler icon, and you can click on it. Advanced. So I can't speak to their accuracy and the precision in terms of how accurate or how precise their measurements are. I haven't seen any claims from them saying how precise they are, but they're okay. I would say the downside of there are some pros and cons, I would say. So they don't have different modes exactly, but they do have a snap feature. So the way it works is that you basically hover your mouse cursor over their interface. You'll have to go try it out to know what I'm talking about, really, because I'm probably going to just ruin it by describing it. But it's pretty cool, I have to say. I can give them that. When you hover your mouse cursor over an area, it does this kind of zoom in thing where there's these crosshairs, and it will kind of try to auto snap to intersections. And then you kind of click and you sort of drag your mouse over and you can click on something else. And it sort of works. It doesn't feel precise when you use it. And it really, at the end of the day, it isn't any more precise than you'd think it would be. So what I mean by that is the snap feature often misses the intersection. So if you're trying to measure just the width of a wall, the auto snap will often be slightly off left or right. And I have no idea if that's because the image is not correct or because their point cloud that's behind it isn't perfectly lined up with the image. It's not clear. They don't really tell you in their viewer. But they allow you to basically measure from point to point. The neat trick, though, with theirs is that you can actually turn the snap thing off and then just measure freely wherever you want. But if you do that, I'm not 100% sure, but I think that would be even less precise because it appears as though the snap feature is automatically snapping your cursor to their point cloud and it's not synced up with the image. I don't know, so I'm not really sure. So they don't have different modes, but they do allow you to do several measurements. The advantage of iGUIDE, I'm putting it back to iGUIDE for a minute, is that you have a type of measurement that is accessible and easy to use for literally everyone. Anyone can use measure mode 1. It's very, very simple. Click, drag on the floor plan. I don't know if you guys can see that, but I'm doing it in the corner. And you have a line and it tells you the distance between 2 points. I can teach that to anybody. Some people are going to have more success than others because it kind of relies on your creativity to decide what it is you want to measure, but easy. Anyone can do it. It's included in every single iGUIDE, so it is ubiquitous. It's fantastic. And there are some people, not as many, or it's a smaller subset of people, but there are people who want more information, and that's who measure mode 2 and 3 are for. So measure mode 1 is for everyone. Measure mode 2 and 3 is for people who want more and who are willing to do the heavy lifting of jumping through a few hoops to get that information. So you might think, this comes up a lot, this is a lot of feedback that I've gotten in the time that advanced measurement has been around, that measure mode 2 and 3 are too complicated. Okay, so if anyone says that, then it's not for them. That's easy. Or you need to do a little convincing if it is for them and they just don't get it. So it may seem a little cumbersome to have to identify a wall and then measure on that wall. But that amount of effort is trivial compared to the amount of data that you can get out of it. So if you have someone that says it's too complicated, that's just because it's not for them. It's for a smaller group of people who really want that extra information and are willing to work for it. There are a few other competitors that may have similar types of, measurement modes, but I haven't seen anything other than what Matterport offers that really comes in even close to this. So it's very, very useful in terms of getting information in order to plan and make decisions about a space before you get into that space. So I'll just hit you with a few examples from my personal experience, and then if no one asks any more questions, we'll call it there. So when I moved into this house, it would have been very, very nice to know before I moved all my furniture in if I could have fit my couch on this one wall up in our living room. There's a window, and then it kind of goes over the wall, and I couldn't measure it. And I was like, So, I dragged the whole couch in, put it down, and it doesn't fit. So now I have to remove it. So it would have saved me some effort. And I don't want to say I'm lazy, but I don't have my friends here anymore to help me carry around heavy couches. The setup, like our media setup, it's a fancy way of saying my TV on a pedestal. I wasn't sure if it would fit in my basement, and I wouldn't have to worry about it. It fits easily. It fits so well, and I just couldn't tell, right? Like I had basic room dimensions, but they were definitely not accurate. They were definitely misrepresented, but not in a bad way. They were just slightly off, or it wasn't clear how they were recorded, I should say. So with iGUIDE, one of the benefits of our room dimensions is that we're very clear about what they are, from longest length to widest width. So, and on the floor plan, they're very clearly labeled, but I didn't have access to that. I didn't have an iGUIDE when I moved into this house, unfortunately. And the other thing that would have been just so handy would have been the ability to measure the garage. I was under this weird misconception that the garage on this house that we just moved into was very small. It's not, it's humongous. So I don't know what I was worried about. I could have saved myself a ton of aggravation. And what I mean by that is my previous house had like all these shelving units, and I didn't want to move with them because they couldn't disassemble. They weren't fancy. They were just those cheap plastic ones, you buy at Walmart, that stack or whatever. So I was really concerned. Should I bring them? Should I not? I ended up deciding, no, I don't need them. I'll, if I have to, they'll take up half the truck. So I'll just buy new ones when I get there. It'll be a waste of money, but at least I won't have to worry about moving them or, having to leave behind other furniture. And then it turns out I didn't even need them. There's tons of space in there. So anyway, having the ability to measure is an absolute lifesaver from the perspective of a worried home buyer like myself. I get concerned about things. And I had a long closing time. So I had like a month and a half to sit around and think about this stuff and worry. So that was, from my experience, one of the coolest things about being able to measure a space really accurately is to be able to get answers to those questions and make decisions to ease my mind, and then also to save me some effort. Okay, can you order advanced measurements later if requested down the road? Yes, 100% you can, and I will show you exactly how to do that. Let us suppose that you have an iGUIDE for which you want to add advanced measurements, or for which you wish to add any of the paid add-ons. So they're all lined up right here on screen: Google Street View, Floor Planner, VR, and advanced measurements. So you can do one of two things. You can either request that your iGUIDE be upgraded to premium, and then you just pay the difference. That's the only thing that you have to pay for. So if you wanted advanced measurements, you could just send customer service or draft an email and say, hey, I'd like this upgraded to premium. Actually, we're going to be really precise. Create a support ticket and ask. That'd be much faster. So if you just want the advanced measurements, all you have to do is find your iGUIDE. I'll try to find one. Yeah, I don't know if this has advanced measurements. Oh yeah, it probably already does. Either way, you would find your iGUIDE. This is my old house. That's why I'm showing you. And if you click iGUIDE details, you're going to see a series of buttons on the left. One of them is called Packages and Add-Ons. If you click on it, you can then click either of these, any checkbox that appears here. I apparently already have advanced measurements, but that will appear if it's a standard. And then you'll be billed just for the add-on. So at any time, you can upgrade an iGUIDE with any paid add-on from here, from the Packages and Add-Ons section. You will just be billed the difference. Okay, I'm going to give you guys a couple more minutes to ask some more questions. And if there aren't any, we're going to call it there, and I'm going to go make another coffee. So just while I have you guys, I just want to point out that you can access support materials at the iGUIDE knowledge base. Oh, excuse me. So if you have any questions that come up ever, always go to the support desk first. Sorry, I should call it support desk, not knowledge base. There's tons of information here. 9 times out of 10, if you call me or call or email support and you ask a question, they're just going to send you here anyway. You know what I mean? You might as well just go here ahead of time rather than wait. I'll give you an example. It's 2 a.m. You're editing your data. You have a question. You create a ticket. You got to wait till the next day. No one's going to see it until minimum 7 a.m. at the very least, and then maybe later if there's a lot of traffic. So don't bother. Just come here and have a look. And then also, please participate in the forum if you can. So forum.goiguide.com. There's all sorts of cool stuff there. The forum is a huge advantage that you have as a service provider because you can go there and you can see what your fellow service providers are doing. And you can figure out the solutions to problems before you even knew they existed, which is very cool. And finally, please like and follow us on Facebook if you haven't already, and mention us and tag us when you post, because then we will see your content and we will share it. Awesome. We'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much, everybody. Really appreciate it. And like I said, the recording for this webinar will be available later. Have a great rest of your day.